The Israel-Hamas war putting a spotlight on cryptocurrency. The Wall Street Journal reported earlier this week that Hamas, Hezbollah, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad received large amounts of funding via crypto in the year that was leading up to last Saturday's attack on Israel. On Tuesday, Israeli police said that the country had frozen crypto accounts that were used to solicit donations for Hamas, with Binance assisting in the process. Joining us right now is Ari Redbord, who is the head of legal and government affairs at TRM Labs. That's an organization that helps other organizations track crypto-related financial crime. Previously, he worked as an assistant U.S. attorney in Washington prosecuting terrorism, threat, finance, and crypto cases. And, Ari, this is something that we have been watching for a very long time, but this is a real-life example. What do you know right now? What can you tell us about how much has been sent in financing to these terrorist organizations through crypto?
First, thank you so much for having me. I think it's important as we discuss sort of cryptocurrency and terror financing that it is a very small part of a much larger sort of terror financing puzzle that involves networks of hawalas and money exchangers and really state sponsors. But look, crypto does play a role, and Hamas was an early adopter. Really, we saw in 2019 Hamas start to solicit donations in Bitcoin. In 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice actually seized a number of websites and about 150 cryptocurrency accounts associated with Hamas that Hamas was using to raise funds. So on the one hand, we're seeing a lot of activity, fundraising activity in crypto, but we're also seeing really sophisticated efforts by U.S. law enforcement together with Israeli authorities to actually seize cryptocurrency wallet addresses and ultimately the funds back. So a lot of success in this area as well.
Yeah, that's what I would say. This is supposed to be something where the ledger tracks every single person. You would think in some ways it would eventually be easier to track down the criminals and the terrorists using that very ledger. What prohibits you from doing it?
Yeah, it's really well said. I was a federal prosecutor for a long time, as you mentioned, and I investigated cases involving networks of shell companies and hawalas and high-value art, right? There was no ability to trace and track those things on an open public ledger. And I think that's really what has allowed successful investigations and ultimately prosecutions in the cryptocurrency space. And I think we'll continue to see that here. You know, I think the paradox is crypto allows terrorist financiers and others to move larger amounts of funds faster cross-border than ever before. But at the same time, law enforcement using tools like TRM can now trace and track funds in real time, something that we never could do in financial crime investigations before. In 2021, there was violence in Israel and Gaza. We saw fundraising increase. We're likely to see that again here, but we're also likely to see a lot of successes because of the ability to track and trace funds on the blockchain. Just this week, Israeli authorities announced the seizure of cryptocurrency addresses associated with Hamas. Those are much longer, more complicated investigations if they're not on the blockchain. So I'd say I think there's a lot of ability of law enforcement and authorities to track and trace the flow of funds. Where, quite frankly, we lose visibility is the places we've always lost visibility, and that is off the blockchain. And I think we'll continue to have challenges there, to be sure. But I think we're going to continue to see Hamas and other organizations attempt to raise funds in crypto because they will attempt to raise funds in absolutely any way they can. But we're also going to see successes. And I can tell you that Israeli authorities, the U.S. government, our partners that we work with around the world are laser focused on this issue right now.
What would you say you've seen in the last several days just in terms of fundraising, and what can you do about it? Do you go after the terrorist organizations receiving those funds? Do you go after the people who are providing the funds?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I think what we've seen is a number of different organizations that are attempting to raise funds in support of Hamas. And quite frankly, what we do at TRM, we have a team of threat hunters who are out there identifying cryptocurrency addresses associated with these types of fundraising. And then we build out in our tool addresses that are associated with those, that allows law enforcement, that allows FBI, Israeli authorities, and others to track and trace. So what we're doing is we're out there looking for addresses wherever we can that are being used to raise funds for Hamas, and we're sharing that information with law enforcement and helping them build investigations to ensure that we can, A, seize those addresses, but then take down the infrastructure, right? There are websites that are being used to raise funds. There are social media platforms, Telegram channels. So really working in every possible way to take down the infrastructure that terrorists are using to raise funds right now.
Binance gave a comment to CNBC through email. It says Binance actively partners with global law enforcement agencies and regulators united in the mission to combat terror financing. They say they use the data to pinpoint individuals, addressers, and beyond. I guess my question is, how helpful have Binance and other exchanges been? How helpful have any of the social media companies been just in terms of trying to take down any of these efforts once they're identified?
Look, the overwhelming majority of sort of cryptocurrency exchanges, particularly the ones that everyone's heard of, in the U.S. or work with U.S. customers, are very compliant. They use tools like TRM. We work with most of the large exchanges in the space, and they are doing compliance. They have robust compliance teams, and part of compliance is responding to subpoenas from law enforcement, responding to requests for information. And I think the example, and this isn't the first time we see this example where Binance has worked closely with authorities. We saw a case really just a couple of weeks ago where Binance had worked with law enforcement authorities to help take down a network. Look, I think the problem is that this is happening in the first place, right? That these terror financiers are able to engage with exchanges, but exchanges are getting better and better, and their compliance teams and the tools they use are becoming more sophisticated. But I do think that it's really critical to ensure that we have a highly regulated system when we're talking about those on and off ramps, right? It's one thing to raise funds in crypto. It's another to be able to use them to buy weapons, to off-ramp those funds. And that's really where we need to ensure that regulation exists on those on and off ramps or those exchanges.
You said Hamas itself was the earliest terror organization to start adopting crypto. When did that happen?
That's correct. I mean, we saw fundraising around 2019 or so. Really started with Hamas using Telegram channels. It grew to ultimately putting solicitations on their websites. And we've seen it continue. I think as we move into a digital age, right, where wars in part are fought on blockchains, we're going to see more and more of this type of activity. But I think the really unique qualities of blockchains, this ability to track and trace funds in real time, is really the difference maker here. We can track and trace those funds in ways we could never before and seize them back. And we're seeing U.S. authorities do that. We're seeing Israeli authorities do that. And I know that will continue.